Habsburg should jump out at you like a neon sign. It is the House Habsburg that is the pivot of almost all historical data from about 1100 on with regard to military operations and containment of Germanic expansion throughout all of Europe for the last, 800 years. If you recall, eventually they created what was called the Habsburg Ring, which was a coalition of either Spain and France, or France and England, in conjunction with Russia, to compartmentalize and contain the Germans, in this case the Austro-Hungarian Empire, earlier than that the German Confederation, earlier than that et al., etc.
Wasn't it Assyria at one time?
Oh, that was lower, yes, the lower branch, yes, Assyria.
Yeah.
Different nations participated, but in reality, it is obvious who finally came out on top of the turd pile, so to speak, because what we have here is Otto von Habsburg is now the Speaker of the House of the EEC, which is the single most powerful position in the EEC. That should tell you something about who reigns.
They own about, what, all of, was it South Carolina? I mean, a shoot of that family.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, yeah. Well, that's where the Warburgs own.
Yeah, they own almost all of South Carolina.
Want to leave the door open? You're alive. Anyway, what's interesting, if you get a chance, there are extra copies of this, you can take them with you. It is a present listing of the CFR. I want to also allude to people who've never seen this before, something that's very interesting when you see the earlier ones. For all of you who haven't looked at this, now it's being made in Kerrville, Texas. Does anybody remember where this was made a few years back? Waco, Texas, thank you. This originally was printed in Waco, Texas, and completed an entire dossier on virtually every and any CFR or TC member. It is interesting to note that during the initial attack on Waco, all of the key individuals were either educated in Waco or they lived there. Now this is rather strange, and they're all from the same boys club, by the way, too, or girls club, depending how you look at it. The documents involved include a few key names which I had been curious about, which are now confirmed. Colin Powell was definitely a CFR member. We had suspected but did not have particular data. Also, as it will be expected here, almost all of the major banks, every one of their key people are, of course, CFR. One interesting thing is to look at the media, if you get a chance. The reason I say this is I laugh when some people say, well, I change channels to find out what's really going on.
Can I ask you a question? Who is that, the head of the Joint Chiefs now? Who is that guy? Where did he come from? Where did he come from, by the way?
Shashka Kalbili. Yeah, well, originally he's worked with NATO, and unfortunately comes from the Eastern Bloc.
He's not a West Point guy, is he?
Oh, no.
Dick Cheney was a member.
No, what's interesting is this. He, at 14, left with his parents from Eastern Europe during the occupation. Many people who left Germany and the East were not necessarily, quote-unquote, Nazis and fled Germany because they were Nazis. They may have also fled because they were good card-holding party members.
Yeah.
Because there were just as many there before, during, and after the occupation as there were Nazis involved in both sides. So you must remember that the deep implantations, or the deep implants that are involved, or sleepers as we call them, I wouldn't even call this a sleeper, in fact cultivating. If you're cultivating individuals for these mergers or key operations against the United States, why is it far-fetched? We've spent more ludicrous time, or I should say more money on ludicrous projects that had absolutely nothing to do with reality than this. So and it would not be that complicated for them to generate the technology.
So who are they wanting to replace the Navy guy with now? The guy that the Navy...
I think some of them won't be replaced. Thank you for reminding me of that. Another point here. Huh?
The tail hook scandal?
Oh, it won't have anything. That's irrelevant. They were getting him out of the way because of the homosexual issue, yes. It had nothing to do with the heterosexual action. It's the fact that they need to bring the homosexuals in to disrupt the rest of the military mechanism. The first 5 issues that came out of the Clinton administration, 4 out of the 5 succeeded. The only one that did not was the homosexual issue. One. Hey, John. Oh, thank
you. Down. That's the contract for your next Friday.
Oh, okay, good.
Better read it though. I haven't even opened it yet.
Okay.
See what the hell the deal is.
An interesting point. The restructuring of the military is going to take place, and the homosexuals will probably be in place in less than a year and a half, 2 years. If they switch over the government, switch over the military, it won't make any difference anyway. May I remind you that almost all of the NATO states have one form or another already eliminated the homosexual issue.
I thought dispersing our
The forces,
military troops.
but that's one of many. They're not. They don't go with any single plan. Remember that. Multi-tiered. Everything. I think I got to stress this again. You're not dealing with a monolithic, or I won't say monolithic, or a one-dimensional creature here. There are many plans within plans, circles within circles. They have vast resources. They are going to take advantage of a situation where they must have insurance policies. Now, the homosexual issue was just one to disrupt the military and eventually liquidate many of those key people who were in higher positions. They did not succeed. We were able to rally the troops, so to speak, forgive me for the pun. And what we succeeded in doing was generating enough strength to contain the situation. However, while we were busy fighting that, need I remind you of something that did go through and went through and has not been challenged at all? The fetal tissue research bill was successful and is in place. You won't see any more movies like you saw the last time with all little baby parts that we were showing people who were in this one video, because there's now profit to be made in the corpses of those infants. It's no longer a situation where they, whoops.
And cut them up.
Got their daddy boy.
Oh. The federal budget and the cities, a review of the president's budget for fiscal year 1989 and 1990.
This is the one I called you on. You said to get the hell out of the house, remember?
Yes, duplicate as many as we could.
Duplicate criminal justice.
Okay, this is something we just got purely by accident, but this is tied into a lot of the other documents that we usually acquire. This one was eliminated by one of the libraries. Make sure we get it on tape here because we want this generated as quickly as we can.
Any more light?
What is it?
It's good.
Hold on.
It's good, he said.
Good? Okay. Federal budget and the cities, a review of the president's budget for fiscal year 1989, October 1, 1988 to September 30th, 1989, dated February of 1988. If anybody is familiar with guns, drugs, guns, drugs, and when the program came out back in 88, or actually 89, we have to first of all insert here the basic formula of thesis, antithesis, synthesis. You have to create the problem, demonstrate the problem, and then try to implement what was an unacceptable action that otherwise would not have taken place had they not created the problem. This has to do with criminal justice. It also has to do with the management of our youth problem. How many years have I been saying now about the fact that the street gangs would not have taken place had it not been for the fact they let them happen? They fabricated the situation. You only watch about 1 hour of the Rap channel to find out just how violent they're promoting these people to be, or MTV for that matter. Well, the administration for fiscal year 89 budget proposal states that the enforcement of the laws and provisions for the safety of people is a central domestic responsibility of the federal government. Yet, a major provision of the fiscal year 89 criminal justice budget is the elimination of all state and local assistance programs. As stated in the proposal, these programs should be terminated because the states can better afford to pay for these programs than can the federal government, and because states and localities benefit directly from them. These philosophical underpinnings are the basis for the administration's proposals, which include a 4.5% overall budget increase for federal law enforcement activities, including increase in FBI and DEA authorities, and a $1.4 billion request to finance 10 new federal prisons, as well as the elimination of 6 programs which currently provide financial assistance to state and local governments' criminal justice systems. The programs slated for elimination are anti-drug abuse, state and local assistance, juvenile justice, crime control, regional information sharing, and Mariel Cuban program, which was on its last leg anyway. Now what you need to do is create the problem. So you promote the gang issue. With your synthesis with the boob tube and cable, you pump in to the lame brains what it is you want them to do. End product, street violence. Eventual mission, just after this was promoted, PL 100-690 was generated, which is the answer to their antithesis program. They created the problem, demonstrated the problem, and this is what created it. And then they followed through with PL 100-690 and also into the latest crime bill, or the omnibus crime package, which is the other half of the wall coming together. The rest of the pieces in place, they will have a complete and intact police state to use at their discretion on whoever they wish to. And that's what this is all about. This was a throwaway document. This was to be done away with. The nice thing is this.
Somebody found it intact.
Well, actually, it was, how did you get it, John? You just
I bought it at Hillsborough College rummage sale when I was
Okay.
out.
What a pile now. This has budgetary figures, numbers, etc.
Mark, what'd you say? Even humans make mistakes?
Even humans make mistakes.
Yeah.
Or even inhumans make mistakes.
What's real interesting is you didn't even get into the, this is the one you told me to take off when I told you I started reading the exact quotes
Yep.
from it. He said basically to pack up, get copies made, and leave right now, because I'd had this at my house for probably I bought it in August, didn't know what was in it, my wife was going to throw it away, and I said, don't throw anything away until I read it.
It was a good thing he did.
Okay, I gotta show you. Okay, now you didn't go far enough here. You see with your criminal justice system, the next page, after you read what you read, here's where you were stopped, right?
Oh, okay.
Okay, now look at the next page. Abrams tanks, remember when I told you the stuff
Right.
was itemized?
Okay.
Here's where they start.
The President's budget also calls for the procurement of the following: 545 M1 Abrams tanks, 72 AH-64 Apache attack helicopters, 72 Black Hawk utility helicopters, 10 Navy deployable battle force ships, 16 tactical air wings, 24 land-based squadrons, 25 fully equipped active Air Force wings, 36 F-16 multi-mission fighters, and 1,500 advanced medium-range air-to-air missiles. These were to supply and support and assist in the overall operations discussed earlier in part of PL 100-690. So these are support mechanisms, and it itemizes the technology that is to be deployed through such events as the MJTF.
It lists the MJTF. The
Multi-jurisdictional
FinCEN
task
lists
force.
everything in there. They're all
does?
under.
Well,
Yes, it does.
Now, the MJTF police are not a combat military
How
force.
soon can we get copies of this?
This is right now, do we have any extras?
Right now.
What we're doing, I gotta explain why we do this. Now, John's already had both the Secret Service and the FBI at his house to confiscate his records
3
before.
times each.
Now, what happened is we have a lot of original documentation from the GPO, Government Printing Office. In one case, there are only 86 copies made of the one document. There are only 2 left in private hands. We have 1. That doesn't mean you do this. What that means is you find a photocopy machine and you crank the shit out of this stuff.
Start putting it out.
And the reason for that is you put it out into the public's hands and they can't hide it. Now, the documents that we were talking about, the one are the documents drawn up to abolish the United States of America.
How many pages is that thing?
Good question. 22, so it's not that
Well,
much.
actually, there's more than that in there, because it doesn't start with a...
Oh,
It's
that's
got
right,
your
yeah.
high nines and this kind of crazy stuff. It's
I'm sorry, yeah, that's not itemized properly
I
there.
could run off about 50 or 60 copies of that for or more.
Okay.
probably 30, 32 pages, really, because it's...
John has one?
Dan has one. I got one.
As long as you'll spread it, I'll give this one to you.
You betcha.
You betcha. Thank you.
MJTF, by the way, you'll recall, we've had 3 publications that were trying to do damage control for the Fed and who were, of course, supposedly private entities. They originally claimed that the MJTF police did not exist. We've demonstrated now, because there have been so many public announcements, that they're now coming out our ears. That the MJTF did not exist is now obviously a falsehood. What they were trying to do is placate the people until they got the program out and into the population and is moving. Instead of being able to respond to the activities before they took place and demonstrating to your senator and your representative that you want to have nothing to do with this, instead it is now in a fixed part of the budget and is proceeding as originally planned. FinCEN is in the same situation. It is in an advanced phase. Remember, FinCEN ties in directly to international police forces and international secret police units, including the KGB in Moscow. So what you are seeing are the same butchers who were involved for the last 7 years, who, as I said before, haven't been out in the unemployment lines, now having the same access to the United States, that they had to their own country. Thank you very much, George. Thank you very much, Bill. Now, that's why our forces and a lot of our people are going to refuse to participate. But before we go any farther, because I know people get tired, this is the Waco home video. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
You finished about the Brady Bill?
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
That's another.
I will read this first, yes. December 1993, if the method of passage was less, okay, this has to do with the Brady Bill itself. If the method of passage was less than inspiring, the enactment of the Brady gun control bill still put a fitting capstone on an unusually solid record of congressional accomplishment. The Wall Street Journal gave a slightly different version of the Brady Bill passage in an article entitled, "Gun Control Bill Jumps Last Hurdle as GOP Retreats. 97 Empty Senate Seats." After days of personal animus and futile backroom dealings, Republicans backed down without much of a show for their efforts. The bill passed without debate, with only 3 senators sitting in a chamber emptied by the Thanksgiving holiday. As Vice President Al Gore, or is it Al Gore, and Mark O. Hatfield, an Oregon Republican who reported the bill, watched, the 2 Senate leaders, Bob Dole of Kansas and George Mitchell of Maine, pronounce the measure adopted by unanimous consent, that is a parliamentary device allowing the leaders to pass the legislation themselves by voice vote after ascertaining that no senator would object. All of us are happy to have this issue behind us, Mr. Dole said. After a long, long, hard fight, Jim Brady has won. Well, in reality, he has. Editor's note, reread those quotes. Only 3 members of the Senate were on the floor, Mitchell, Dole, and Hatfield. 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat, and they passed it. Okay? Dole gave his blessing to the passage later, saying, "I let it pass because it seemed to many of our colleagues, for or against, let's get this issue behind us." As USA Today said, sometime Wednesday, Senate Minority Leader Bob Dole finally got religion. He finally consented to the Brady Bill. So 3 senators, with 97 missing, plus Vice President Al Gore, passed a bill which was dead for this year and may not have passed in the upcoming election year either.
3 senators with 97.
If you have an agenda, it is irrelevant as to whether or not it might pass. And this is similar to, as everybody will recall, the Federal Reserve Act.
Yep.
The Federal Reserve Act was passed on the 23rd, signed on the 24th, and became, and was empowered by the, within 60 days, right?
Yeah, and it passed 298 to 60, and most good congressmen were gone because it.
They were all home for the Christmas break. Remember, the train service was the most common way to go home at that time. Which means you had to travel a distance. There were no planes.
And Christmas was a religious service that those kind of senators go home for.
That's right. Exactly. So, in lieu of that, and understanding that the same night the crime bill did pass, the crime bill is finished. It is history. There is no real issue involved. I will remind you, again, oh yes, Bob.
Mark, I talked with Jackie Patru last week on the Council on Domestic Relations, and I couldn't believe the things that I was hearing from her. She said, first of all, she would start to bash me about the way we meaning our group here, you specifically, are, getting prepared as far as the ammo and weapons are concerned.
It's best to be slaughtered rather than fight. I understand that.
Right. Oh, by the way, she says the crime bill has not passed.
Yes, the crime bill has
I
passed.
says, no, you must not. You must not be you must not know what you're talking about because it passed on the same day that the NAFTA and the Brady bill passed.
Senate
And
Bill
she says,
8.
She says.
Because that's the crime bill we're talking about.
Yeah, it's all done. It went through the House
She
and the
says,
Senate.
well, it's not a done deal because the House and the Senate have.
That's what everybody's saying. Everybody's saying the
because
same thing.
the actual language has to agree.
Right, and they've already stated publicly that they're going to take the worst readings, in other words, the most excessive readings of both, and that's the only reason it's taking time. And even then, it has already passed. I will remind everybody of this. Let's go back, since I apparently, and we have to do this with not all of you, I'm not worried about you, but let me remind you something. They said they were going to raise the taxes. You were all in favor of the taxes, weren't you? Nobody's raising their hand. They passed the exact tax they told you they were going to pass. When we got to the NAFTA issue, oh, it was a close race. Oh, it's real tight, it's neck and neck. As soon as it was voted, 40 votes over. It wasn't even close. Now the Brady Bill came along and everybody said, oh, I'll never see that in my lifetime. What happened? Every time that they have done something, they have told you in advance what they are going to do, when they're going to do it, and they did it. Why should there be any mystery or illusion to this? Bottom line, that's not, the only thing that bothers me is, again, I'm just the messenger here, guys, with this one. They have done what they have done. It is finished. The only thing they're worried about is that they've hit with one foot and the other one is about to drop. And even as the first one hit, the only thing that they made a mistake on is this. Pass me that. Is that in the last 4 weeks, more so than at any other time in history, probably in the last 6 weeks, I'll give us the benefit of the doubt here. In the last 6 weeks, more weapons like this and heavier, bigger, nastier weapons that can reach farther out, more of them have passed into the hands of the American people than at any time in our history with regards to armament. And the enemy now knows it. So what they had to do is restructure their thought, because like I said, they expected riot. I'm not going out in the street with a rock. And I'm sure as shit not going to rail, scream, or panic when the time comes. We are thinking people. And I am not going to lay down my life for the fun of it. If I'm going to have to fight, I'm going to make sure that I make whoever it is that's created this situation pay dearly.
Come on.
That's right. If there are 10 million, let's go back to basic math again. We have to keep reminding everybody. I am not stupid. There are 70 million firearms owners by either Handgun Control Incorporated or the NRA statistics. They are the same creature. There is no difference between either side. One is the friendly opposition of the other. They are the illusion to create the fabrication or the smoke of contention that does not exist.
It's like two divorce attorneys.
That's right. There we go. They're both in the same house, so it doesn't make any difference. The idea is that we're supposed to have our little knockdown, drag-out cat fight. When we're done, we're supposed to concede to the enemy and let them have their way. That's the only reason they've created the situation. But the reality is this. Both sides agree there's 70 million firearms owners minimum in the country.
I think there's a bit more than that.
Well, I'm saying I'm going to go with conservative numbers, never exaggerate. 6 out of 7 firearms owners will surrender their weapons in a heartbeat. Period. They will buckle over, they will hand them over, they will let them walk to their house and eat their lunch. Period. That's a realism. That's not fiction. You all have to think that way too. But the good part is this. Good old, straightforward mathematics. If 6 out of 7 surrender their arms, we have 10 million good, confident warriors. And I pity whoever the fool is that thinks he's going to stand in front of them.
That's a good size army.
No military force can project 10 million men anywhere on the planet. And the difference is this. Take a look at this. That is a standard, conventional military arm. It is supposed to be. It is not supposed to be a hunting rifle. It can be, which is acceptable. I don't care what it is as long as it puts a bullet down range. But the point is this. We have millions of them. I don't care about the ones that get turned in. They're not relevant either. They are like dust. It is as if you are walking amongst ghosts. They are irrelevant. Let them surrender. Who cares? I am sure that when the time comes after we win, which I think is most entertaining, many people will, shall we say, become sunshine patriots. As Samuel Adams said, it is very easy to become a patriot when victory is assured. It is another thing to commit your family, your life, your future to this issue.
There might be one in that.
Yeah, it's okay. Oops. But as I said, those are all through the nation, and they're not even necessarily the best. They're a good gun. Like the weapon that he's holding right there, the US M1, an M1A, it'd be 500 yards of dead space, and I'll show you 500 dead soldiers given the opportunity and enough time. It's that simple. If I can see it, I can hit it. And the American rifleman has always been the scourge of the battlefield. We don't need a lot, we just need to have enough to win, and that doesn't take that much.
You told him at the NRA? American
No, I'm
Rifleman,
talking about
or-
us.
Okay, I thought you were talking about...
U.S. riflemen, American
Okay.
riflemen, us,
I got it.
U.S. and women. There's some women out there I don't want to stand down range in front of at all either. Don't worry about it, ladies. I know you can shoot. I just prefer to protect our female population because we are not dogs or a pack of wolves. It is our objective to see that we maintain a civilized nature, if at all possible. That's what you're there for, is to temper us beasts when the time comes. Remember that.
And we'll do it gladly.
Okay? That's right. We have to have it. Everybody has a reason, everybody has a purpose. That does not mean, however, that you cringe in the house and wait to be overrun. Unlike other countries, we as a group are more than capable of protecting ourselves, and everybody will have to participate. Somebody asked me that question before today. What do we do about rioters and looters? Well, what would you do about rioters and looters?
Shoot them.
Thank you. What's wrong with that question? Anybody got another one?
Phone number.
Bottom line, yeah, phone number. Oh, I'm sorry. Do we have the phone number for the office?
Is that the one you're gonna put up?
This is the one we're going to put up as the call-in. If you identify, I'll lay down the criteria.
Please.
If you identify what is obviously an unusual situation, if you see black uniforms, if you see United Nations symbols, if you see mechanized or air mobile columns, air mobile being helicopter, use our intelligence collection system, the original notations as described, who, what, where, when, what were they doing, what were you doing, so we can get an overview. Get to the nearest payphone and call this number, 313 332 1974. Okay? Now, there is a second number. We'll get that for you as soon as we can. But for the time being, in this way we can collect and then disseminate information concerning movements and activities. We have affixed at least 2 positive locations where units are garrisoned in the Detroit area. I will remind you that approximately 3 weeks ago, Mr. Benson was on television announcing that offensives would take place inside the United States, that they would be acting in 10 specific counties. Wayne County was listed as the second of the target states, of the target counties, with regard to the nation. The counties are not side by side. They are spread all over the country. This falls in line with their concept of gradualism. They started out with individual homes, then you go to multiple homes, then you go to neighborhoods. Now we're doing groups of neighborhoods. The next step is city, or in fact an entire county. If you do not believe that this can be done, then you had best refer to the Randy Weaver siege, in which 2 whole counties in the upper part of Idaho were laid under martial law. Again, it got no national media coverage. It was given no publicity as far as what activities actually took place, but it was well documented on shortwave. So much so that, in fact, that's why shortwave was when it came time to deal with Waco.
It's surprising that those 2 counties didn't trigger the restoration then.
Well, in some ways, as one person said, and in fact, it's been said by one of the survivors of the Waco siege, and a person we heard talk, or a person that alluded this to us, that on the one hand, they would wish that it had not happened, or better still, that the American people might have responded to that situation. But since you can wish in one hand and certainly not recreate or step back in time, then perhaps it is the price that needs to be paid in order to awaken the American people. And I think that that is true. That we've now had our Lexington. You all got your chance. You all failed. Now you all get to find out whether or not you got the right steel. Concord is next. We've already seen Lexington burn in the distance, and it was a rich, deep, black smoke. They don't get a second shot. They come at us again, we stop them butt cold in their tracks, we make them pay tenfold for any casualties they generate.
Here.
That's the only option we have.
17 children.
That's right. I don't know if any of you saw it, and I don't know if any of you sit here with a dry eye when you watch that tape. I don't want you here in my house. Okay.
You've got a new tape of that? Okay.
It's on there?
It's on the
Is it the one,
backside of the,
forgive us, we didn't know?
Forgive us, we didn't know. The reason I say that is because what it does is intimates a situation that was made to become distant and irrelevant.